What's up, guys? My name is Doofus Mcdooface, and finally, it's time for a Merc guide. Today, we're going to be talking about income mercenaries, power mercenaries, general waves you can send, situational waves to send, just sort of the theory of why you need to use mercenaries in Legion TD2. That's how I broke it down, right? Sending Mercs why, income versus power Mercs, general wave sends, and then I'll probably take some builds and sort of tell you when I would send, what I would send, based off of sort of game mechanics. And I'll have chapters for 1, 2, 3, 4 if you just want to skip to one of those things. So let's start with sending Mercs. Why? First off, what the heck's a mercenary, right? If you're new to the game, what is a mercenary? It's these guys. All of these are the mercenaries. These are things that you can send your opponent, right? Just the basics, right? If I'm in lane 1, I'll be sending this lane right here, right? That's just the basics, right? The basics is I can send mercenaries with however much mythium I have into my opponent's lane. Now, what is the purpose of that? Well, the first purpose is you get income, right? The first, most generic purpose, if I send a snail, that says +6 income. So if I send a snail right now, right? I was already greed, so it gave me, so now I have 10 income, right? Wave goes through, Bam. I get 10 gold from my income, right? That also works with king ups, of course, right? But if you send any of these, you're going to get the income after the wave ends, right? So that is just the basics of sending, right? Now, why would you send other than the income purpose? Well, to leak your opponent, right? You would prefer to leak your guy, because what happens when you leak your opponent? You get gold. You get a certain percentage of gold based off of the amount of creeps they leaked. If they also leak your sends, you get even more gold, right? So that is why you would send. I mean, that's why you send, right? I mean, you send not only for your own econ, but also to benefit you in two ways, right? It can benefit you by hurting your opponent, giving you more gold, giving you an advantage in the game, and also hurting your opponent by making them leak, right? And they get less gold, right? So that's sort of the basics of sending, right? I mean, if you really, really want to make it simple, it's like econ. You're econing, and then you get to choose if you want to econ or play it more aggressively. That's just it, right? Do I want to send a snail, or do I want to send a robo? And I think, unless we want to discuss king ups, I'll just make a little aside here. King ups also plays into sort of mythium, right? We generate mythium through workers. That's really not the discussion today. But just also pointing to that, right? You can't send mercenaries without mythium. You don't generate mythium without workers. That's true, right? The one other place that you can use your mythium outside of mercenaries is king ups. One thing to understand, this is kind of hard for some people to understand, so let me just take it really slow, right? Wave is going on right now. The wave 2 is about to start. Okay, the wave is about to start. If I king up right now, okay, and it now says 16, I'm not getting that additional 6 gold from kinging up until after, right? So that is where sometimes you'll see people describe income king, right? We're gonna get into all of this, right? But the income king is where you send, right? You would turn on auto send, and then you'd also do king ups. But the general thing of that is king ups don't hit your econ until the following wave, right? King ups do not hit your econ until the following wave. I just want to sort of make that clear, right? Because people think, why don't I just fully king up? Well, with you fully kinging up, you are losing out a little bit of gold each wave. You're losing a little bit of compound because you're not getting that +6, right? You're not getting that +6 income until the following wave, and then the following wave, and then the following wave. So if you just do king ups nonstop, you're almost a wave behind from the econ POV, the econ point of view. Just want to make that clear that there is an option to also use your Mythium, right? Not only for mercenaries, but also for king ups. Now, the next thing, I just said income king, right? This is a great thing to lead into the income versus power mercs, right? An income king, right? What is that? Well, an income send is things that do not hinder your economy when you send them. I believe, yeah, it shows green versus red. I usually don't look at this, right? Because I sort of know them all. But if you hover over the sends, +6 income, green. +10 income, red. +12 income, green. Green, green, red, right? So just sort of break this down. Exact number, right? We could just sort of say that 20 divided by 10, right, is 2. 2 divided by 6 is 3. So for every 10 Mythium of a income merc, right? Every 10 Mythium of an income merc, you get 3 income. And that's going to work for all of them, right? For cannoneers, for drakes, all of the green ones, you get 3 income per every 10 Mythium, right? 3 income. Whereas with a power merc, right, the aggressive sends, it's 40 divided by 10, right, is 4. 10 divided by 4 is 2.5. So you're losing 0.5 income every time you send, right? I mean, more than that, right? It goes up 0.5 income per 10 Mythium sent, right? Just to sort of make more sense, I guess I could also just say, like, sending a dragon turtle, which is 40 Mythium, you get 12 income. Sending a robo, which is 40 Mythium, also, you only get 10 income, right? Sort of a broken record here, but just if you want to know the numbers and why it can hurt your game to send the power mercenaries versus income sends, right? So for the income sends, we have snail, lizards, dragon turtles, fiends, dinos, cannoneers, and drakes. Those are going to be all your income sends. Sending those will benefit your econ the most possible. However, although it does benefit your econ the most, it might not give you the greatest chance to leak your opponent. Most times, it's going to not give you the best chance to leak your opponent. Whereas all these others, the robos, the brutes, hermits, imps, moles, pack leaders, mimics, the new honey bear, witches, ogres, ghost knights, four eyes, centaurs, sea drams, shamans, needlers, and krakens are your power mercenaries. These most likely have a greater chance to leak your opponent, but they will be a greater hinder to your economy. So you need to decide whether it is worth to make the aggressive send and send a power mercenary, or say, hey, no big deal, let me just send the income mercenary. And that is a strategical sort of decision you have to make. Me personally, I will give you guys my opinion of how I'm playing the game right now. Now, I'll still go through possible waves to send. My breakdown, my opinion of how to play the game right now, is you only send income mercenaries pre-wave 10, right? So wave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whenever I choose to send, whether it's every wave or every 2, 3 waves, I choose to only send income mercenaries because, well, frankly, I don't think the power mercs are strong enough, but also it gives me the greater chance to sort of scale, right? If let's just use basic numbers. If I send 400 Mythium in the first 10 waves of the game, right? I send 400 Mythium and I send only income, I'd have 120 income, right? 400 divided by 40, 10, 120 income, right? If I just sent 10 dragon turtles, that's all I sent in the first 10 waves, I'd have 120 income. Now, if I only send 10 robos, right? All power mercenaries. That's 100 income. So I'm 20 income less than I would be by sending power mercenaries than if I had sent just income mercs the whole time. Now, of course, I will admit there are some certain situations where it makes sense to send power mercs in the early game. But me personally, in a perfect world, I'm going to send income mercs pre-10 and then waves 11 on. Then I might send power mercenaries also, right? It's really a strategical situation when you choose which to send, which not to send. That's just the truth of the fact is it's a strategical idea. Whether I tell you guys only send income or only send power mercs, there's still going to be situations where it is better to send income the first 10, 15 waves maybe. And then there's going to be better situations where you should send power mercs the first 10, 15 waves also, sort of avoiding those income mercenaries. So that is pretty important. But I think I should also break this down. I know I didn't have it, but sort of the identity of some of these units, some of these mercenaries. The identity of some of these mercenaries, I think you can break down almost all of them into tanks, damage, auras. Those are probably your main ones, right? You've got your tanks, which, I mean, it would be snails, DTs, fiends, dinos, GKs, and Kraken. Oh, and Seadrim, of course. I mean, that's your biggest tank, right? Most of those sort of set as tanks, right? They're sort of tanky. They're most times being attacked before the wave has come through, right? So they come out in front of the wave. I could be saying one incorrectly. It even says tank, right? It actually does say tank. So let's make sure that I'm fully correct here. I think I'm fully correct on my call. Yeah, I mean, I play the game enough, right? Yeah, so I mean, there's tanks, right? And then there's your DPSs, right? They're saying your robos, your lizards, brutes. Yeah, I guess brutes do come out later as well. The imps, the cannoneers, the drakes, the mimics, the witch. Witch is an interesting one though to call DPS. Your ogre, your four eyes, your centaur, your shaman. That's more of an aura, and your needler. And then you've got your auras, right? These aura units are going to be units that buff the wave, buffing the creeps that come out, or buffing themselves too. There are certain situations. Those are going to be hermits, which heals everything. You've got mole, which reduces the damage that the creeps take. Then you have the opposite. You have pack leader, which increases the damage that the creeps deal towards you. You have the new honey bear, which whenever it dies, it's going to heal all the creeps that are left over. And then you've got shaman, which I would say is an aura, but it's only going to do one unit. So it is going to buff only one unit, but the buff is massive. The buff is absolutely massive. So another strategical play is once you're deciding to make those sends, and I'll discuss this a little later on, once you're deciding to send on a certain wave and send power mercs, you sort of need to decide. Do you want to send tanks so that the creeps, the wave, is doing the most damage? Do you want to send a DPS, right? An ogre or a needler, right? And you want the creeps to sort of act as the tanks that your units will attack, or that their units will attack, while the DPS unit, like a needler or an ogre, is doing the most damage, right? Or are you trying to go for the aura play, and you're trying to send pack leader, mole, hermit, right? And just go all in on the auras, just sort of helping all the units cumulatively. You sort of have to make that decision yourself, right? There's going to be certain situations that I will describe when I think that's better, when I think that's worse, and we'll get there. But let's continue talking about general wave sends is what I sort of want to get into. Once again, I'm not going to be able to go through every send possible. But anyone that sort of hits me in the brain, I'm going to hit you with it right now. I'm going to go through every wave that I know of, and I'm going to sort of tell you what I might send in a given game, what could be a good send. So let's just talk about that. I mean, wave 1, right? You've got the first wave of the game. Are you snailing? Are you kinging up? Or are you saving? And that really is, I would say, the easiest thing, right? I know we're talking about sending, but I'd say the easiest way is to check one of your opponents, right? Go to view profile, go to match history, see if there's siestas, see if the units are leaking to a snail, right? Or just play it randomly, right? I mean, it's wave 1. You're not going to give them too much of a lead by just randomly choosing to send a snail or randomly kinging up. I usually like to snail. I like to snail just in case they're fiesta. There's a lot of fiesters. And sometimes you won't be fiesta, and leaking when you're not fiesta to a snail 1 is pretty damaging. So I mean, that's your really your first possible send. You start with the 20 Mythium, is snail. That's your first possible send, is a snail. Then we start getting into the crazier things because it depends on how much Mythium you're saving. Most wave 2s I never save for a Robo or a DT. I am a wave 1 sender. I usually send the snail or king up on 1. And in the circumstance that I do get that 40 Mythium on wave 2, it'll be a snail in income, right? As the wave is going on, and then a snail after income. So I usually don't get a DT or a Robo. Very few circumstances a after income DT or a Robo would work. A DT into a Priestess of the Abyss. A Robo into a Sakura that has nothing else. So there are circumstances where that would make sense, but I would not recommend it. The probability is not great, especially being that it has to be after income most times. So that'd be my wave 2. I wouldn't really recommend too many nasty sends wave 2. Wave 3, when I first started playing the game, the biggest thing was going 0 into 3, right? You save wave 1, you save wave 2, and you send a Brute on wave 3. That may be beneficial to you earlier on in lower elo brackets, below 2000 elo. I don't know what elo you are. Trying a Brute on 3 can be a great way to be aggressive and sort of try to take the lead early. But by doing that, you're sacrificing your economy the first 2 waves. And then you're taking the hit of it being a power mercenary, not an income mercenary. Once again, I'm sort of not a huge fan of the aggressive send, right? You could always switch a fiend in there. And of course, a lot of this is going to be really hard to say because we haven't even talked about like armor types, right? I mean, there's just so many intricacies to these sends. But I'm just going to continue without referencing the armor types and just sort of tell you sort of generic sends. So yeah, wave 3, sometimes you'll see an aggressive Brute. But most times, I'm not going to send that Brute. I'm just going to send a Lizard in income and a Snail after, a DT in income, a Snail after, right? I mean, let's pull up a game just to sort of describe to you the first couple of waves that some of my games might look like. All right, so right here, I am sending into Showtime. I'm Doofus Mcdooface. I'm sending into It's Showtime. You can see I sent a snail on wave 1. I sent a snail on wave 2. I sent 2 snails on wave 3, right? I decided to save one wave, and then I sent income on 5. This is a great description of what I'm about to talk about. Right? This is a great description of what I'm about to talk about. Is once again, I'm just sending income early, but sometimes it is beneficial to save. So, I would say we're pretty much good for wave 3. These are about the best things you're going to be able to send. There's also a Robo that you could send on wave 3 if you're trying to be aggressive. Once again, I think Power Mercenaries are underperforming, so I wouldn't recommend them. But probably one of the most well-known saves early game, one of the most well-known early saves and strategies is you send wave 1 with King Up, Snail, whatever you choose to do, and then you save until wave 4, right? The flying chickens, and you send a dino. You send a dino on wave 4. And the reason that you do this is the dino's attack. You do not want to send a snail. Don't. Right? Oh, this is actually a great thing. Let's show you guys exactly. All right. So just to sort of explain why I would say only send the dino versus don't send dino snail is because of how tanks, right? They're both tanks. A dino and a snail are both tanks, right? How they're targeted. So in the circumstance where you send the dino only, the dino is the first thing to get attacked, right? The dino is the first thing to get attacked, and it allows the wave to do some damage. That's great. Leaked 50%. Fantastic. Against a nightmare. Who could see that coming? Whereas with this, of sending a snail with it, right? Now what's going to happen is my nightmare is going to attack the snail, kill the snail, and just start whomping on the wave. It's just whomping on the wave, right? And so, wow, I mean, this is a perfect example. Look at the outcome. With the additional 20 Mythium, my opponent just held. My opponent held a bigger send because of how the tanks are targeted, right? And this will be very apparent when you're sending a big tank. When you send a dino early, when you send a GK on 8, a siege ram on 11, a kraken on 15, most times you do not want to send additional tanks, right? And we discussed those tank units. And the reason is exactly as you saw. The lower income tank will be targeted first. It can also cause split issues. Which we'll get into on wave 8. But in that circumstance, I don't pay attention to the dino, and my nightmare, this unit, is able to kill the wave, right? And it's a full hold. Whereas if you send just the dino, I'm stuck on it, allowing the wave to smack on the nightmare, and I leak 50%. So circumstances like that, when you're going for that big save, you've got that big tank, just let the tank do the business. And if you have the 20 Mythium, just save it, right? If you have the 20 Mythium, just save it. So that wave 4 dino is a pretty fairly often send. Sometimes you'll now see the brute sent on wave 4 into like bounty hunters. Those are the guys that are going for like angler steed type of stuff. Once again, you know me, I'm going to advise against power mercs. Wave 5 is probably the first and most aggressive wave of the early waves. This is where you're going to see hermits. This is where you're going to see imps. This is where you're going to see robos. This is where you're going to see brutes. Wave 5, because it is a boss wave, right? It's a boss wave, is where you're going to see the most aggressive sends. All right? This is where you're going to see the most aggressive sends early game on wave 5. And when you might want to make that aggressive play, right? If you do feel so inclined to send aggressively, send a power mercenary, right? I would do so on wave 5. Hermit is great because the amount of creeps. It really heals the wave really well. It almost nullifies any of the early AoE units. I'm talking your caskets. I'm talking your flowers. I'm talking your masks, your aqua spirits, right? Hermit is going to be one of your best sends into that on wave 5. I mean, you can literally cause them to leak the entire wave. It can be the difference between a full hold of 80 Mythium income and a full leak 80 Mythium of a Hermit Power Merc, right? Let me see if I can dial one up really quick here. Just to exactly show you where, yes, there are some circumstances, right? There might be some circumstances where you should send aggressively on wave 5. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to pro leak here, but I have an AoE unit and a damage unit. But this Hermit is just going to make the wave just really not take that much damage, right? Because the Cage of Pain's damage that's hitting everything, it's taking forever. It's taking forever to kill stuff, right? So with the Hermit here, 64% leak. And the Hermit just keeps healing those creeps in the mid. It's fantastic. Whereas in a different circumstance, right? The other send would just be lizards, right? The reasons I'm sending lizards is because it being you got an arcane tank and a swift tank. These are both weak to lizards. I think I'll save that for another video because it's going to be quite a bit to talk all about attack effectiveness and all the great sends into Nightmare, all the bad sends into Nightmare. It would be a lot of units, right? A lot of units we'd have to go through. Maybe if you guys want that, I can create another video. But for this video, let's just send lizards instead of the Hermit. And let's see what happens. Right? So we just leaked 64% to a Hermit. Let's see what happens with the lizards. I mean, the lizards are still doing pretty darn well. Right? They're still doing pretty good. Lizards are good. I killed one more creep, right? So maybe this is more of a discussion, right? Maybe this is more of a discussion for those income mercenaries. Almost the same leak, and it was income. And it's because it's the correct send. It's a good send being lizards. Yeah, it's a good send. And also, with the Nightmare, you have a single target, and you have an AoE unit. So maybe Hermit is not the best send there. But yeah, you'll see imps a lot. You'll see hermits a lot. Brutes, robos. Once again, wave 5 is one of your more aggressive waves to send. Another one is gonna be wave 6. Wave 6 brutes are pretty nasty. Wave 6 brutes are really nasty. They increase the damage that the wave 6 creeps do. So you'll see a lot of people saving some of their Mythium on wave 5, right? Let's say they send a DT or a Fiend, and then they don't full send their Mythium, they save a little bit. And then the next wave, on wave 6, they'll send full. So they'll send a Brute and a DT or a Brute and a Snail, and it catches you off guard because you pushed on wave 5 because you thought that was all the Mythium they had. But other than that, I'm really starting to realize that although these are great sends, the actual unit you're sending is just so important. I'm going to have to create a second video here, aren't I? Describing exactly how to send each and every unit. That is incredible. But, yeah, wave 6 brutes, once again, I like income. Rarely are you going to see an imps or mole. You will see Cannoneer and Drake on 6. A lot of people will just save and then do the income play of a Cannoneer or a Drake on wave 6. You'll see that a lot. But yeah, I mean, it really does depend, right? You sort of have to think, like, is the units that they have, are they taking forever to kill stuff? And I should just send tons of tanks, tons of little snails. It's a really long wave. Or are they killing stuff really fast, like with a Nightmare, and I should send DPS. Lizards, Cannoneers, things like that. So I think you sort of have to take into mind, like, what units they have. I mean, that's purely what sending is about, if you're sending aggressively, right? So that would be wave 6. Wave 7, you're going to start seeing really nasty stuff. All right, wave 7... one of the most recognizable sends is a Mimic on wave 7. Once again, attack effectiveness, I will tell you that Mimic is so great on 7 because Pierce into Arcane, right? if we just want to talk about this for a second, Pierce into Arcane is the best, right? So the best unit on 7 and 8, defensive-wise, right, is Arcane. Arcane is going to be the best defender on waves 7 and 8. So the best mercenary you can send, 160 Mythium's a lot, but the best mercenary you can send on wave 7 and 8 is usually a Mimic. And it gets gold. So like even if you don't leak your guy, you might still get some nice gold from killing and eating a lot of the little dudes. Now there's RNG to Mimics because it has to eat the thing to get the gold, right? It has to have the killing blow. You'll also see moles. You'll see lots of brutes, two brutes, 3 brutes. You very rarely see things higher than that. Yeah. And wave 7, there's a lot of little units. That's why it's a good wave to sort of send your damage units like brutes, like mimics. I guess another thing I could have talked about is the actual how the waves interact with your units. And then wave 8 is going to be your first weird wave, right? Wave 8 is where tanks are the most important. In most circumstances. In most circumstances, tanks are amazing to send on wave 8. Why is that? Because they're ranged, right? Because they're ranged DPSers, right? So they just sort of sit back here. They're going to sit back there shooting, right? And there's time to move up to the units, especially if you have melee units. So the reason that tanks are so good is it deters AoE, and if you know the exact best unit that can't be killed, right, by whatever units they have, if you know that perfect send, right, like Pierce is terrible into Fortified, right, what can happen is you can just have their units stuck on the tank. And look at this. My casket doesn't hit the wave. So in this circumstance, a siege ram is very rare. Almost impossible to get on wave 8. But in that area, right, in that situation, I couldn't even get onto the wave. So that wave is just being allowed to cook. And so that is sort of a pretty clear, right, descriptor of why you want to send tanks on wave 8. Whether it's snails, right, whether it's the income route of just dinos or snails or fiends, or if it's the aggressive plays like a GK, like a ram. A mole is actually a pretty decent tank on wave 8 as well. That can also be a really good send. Yeah, but at the end of the day, once again, really does come down to the attack effectiveness. I'm realizing that I definitely need to create a video just sort of harping on all these things, right? Because every unit has its kryptonite. But that's each and every unit, right? Each and every unit has its kryptonite. And that is for tanks, that is for DPS, right? A nightmare might be 4 eyes, might be a mimic, might be brutes, right? This is because it's swift, right? You could also say lizards, right? Because you want the pierce damage. And then the reason that the 4 eyes is good into it is because it scales, right? It scales just in case that this has a butcher on it. But yeah, I mean, with you, there's a lot to learn sending mercenaries. But as long as you sort of start slowly learning the basics, you'll start to learn that unit is weak to this, that unit is weak to that, and so forth. But let's just continue with sort of the general sends. Wave 9. Wave 9, I do see some ogres. I do see ogres on wave 9. People saving from wave 7 to 9, or people saving from wave 6 to 9. You'll also see your pack leaders. And of course, always just going with the basics, right? If you're going to send power mercs, sending brutes, sending robos, I mean, just sending anything you can up until on wave 9 is going to be useful, right? If your opponent is weak. But if they're not weak, that's where we just go with the income sends, right? I love me a good income send, right? But yeah, wave 9 is kind of tanky. Definitely those little dudes, those little carapaces feel pretty tanky. It's probably because fortified is actually like one of the strongest. Now that I'm thinking about it, damn, fortified is really strong. Like, look at, it's only minus 20 plus 5. If you don't have impact against fortified, then that's why wave 9 is pretty difficult. So you could see some aggressive sends on wave 9. Then you got wave 10, the boss wave, right? And normally you're going to want to send damage. And once again, you can send tanks. There's certain times, but I feel like damage on wave 10. But then also auras, right? There's so, and this is the thing with the Mercenaries guide that I want to just say right now. Some things work, other things work, and then those things that you didn't think work might also work, right? So you really just have to sort of try and play enough games to see, okay, that guy has a nightmare. What if I try a pack? What if I try a mole? What if I try 3 brutes? What if I try a mimic? What if I try an ogre? Right? Certain circumstances might work a little bit better depending on the other units that they have. So it does make it kind of hard to send, but that's why Legion is awesome. That's why Legion is fun. So yeah, so I would say if once again you're sending real on wave 10, the boss wave, your best bet is probably damage and then aura, but it really depends on the units, right? It really does come down to the units. If they have Daphnes or a Trinity Archer, of course a mole is going to be great. If they have a Nightmare and you can get a 4 Eyes, I mean, definitely send it. Or a Mimic is also great into it. 4 Brutes, 3 Brutes, right? I mean, it really just comes down to the units they have. And although there's easier, I'm realizing that the earlier waves have easier sends, right? A Dino on 4, Hermit on 5, a Brute on 6, a Mimic on 7, a GK or Mole or Dinos on 8. Then as you get deeper into the game, there's so many different things that can work well that it sort of becomes a little more difficult to describe. But yeah, wave 10 is a boss wave. Wave 11, though, is pretty similar to wave 8. Where a lot of the times tanks are going to be the best. That's where you're sending your siege rams, right? Let's just watch it again. I love watching a good siege ram on 11, as long as I'm not receiving it. Right? As long as I'm not the one receiving a nice siege ram on 11, it's awesome to watch. Right? Sort of the same thing. AoE things can't hit the wave. You're stuck on it. It sucks. Wave 12 is going to be a great wave for auras. I'm pretty clear on that one. Yeah, wave 12 is going to be a great wave for auras. These are pack leaders, your moles, your hermits. Nowadays, your honey bears, the new unit. But once again, there are circumstances where auras aren't the best if they have a really strong unit, like a Dread Knight or a Doppelganger with Butcher, right? Then your 4 Eyes, your ogres are going to be better because you need to damage that unit. Wave 13, they're pretty tanky. The drill golems. Most of the time, you probably want damage, right? You're going to want DPS things almost always on wave 13 when I'm thinking about it. There are a couple circumstances where you want to send a big tank, a siege ram, or a kraken. But most of the time, wave 13, you're going to be best off sending DPS, ogres, imps, mass brutes, things like that. A needler, right? Those are going to be your probably better bet on 13. Wave 14, usually auras, can go for arcane overload with like a centaur. If they have a ton of arcane units, sending a centaur can be great. But once again, I feel like auras on 14 is probably, I think it actually is the most winningest wave in the game. I think 14 ends the most games. So if you are saving for wave 14, I think auras usually get the job done. They have a Doomsday. You're going to want GKs. Once again, that's unit dependent. But the general idea would be auras on 14. 15 is one of those ranged waves where it sort of changes, right? 8 and 11, I really think you want to send tanks. Wave 15, not guaranteed. Now, wave 15, yes, a Siege Ram, yes, a Kraken can be great. But you know what's also great? A Shaman. A Shaman that increases the attack speed by 10%, damage by 25 on the boss, on the giant quadrupus, is insane, right? I mean, it's really awesome. And then if there's that circumstance, you can get a Shaman and a Needler on 15. Screw the wave. Just go all in on the damage for the Shaman Needler, depending on what units they have. But yeah, 15, you're probably going to go 2 routes. Or you can go a medium, right? You could send a Siege Ram and a Shaman. Or you can just send 2 Siege Rams. Or you can go Shaman Needler and not send any tanks at all. So you sort of have to, once again, look at the units you're sending. 16, there's a lot of creeps. That's going to be your auras, because AoE on 16 is just so massive. This is where Honey Bears are probably the most lethal, is wave 16. Yeah, if you're able to send 2 Honey Bears, a Pack Leader, a Mole, and a Hermit on 16, you're in danger. Another thing you can do on 16, right, the Cardinal Wave, is called Pack, Mole, Imps. And it's one of the best things that I learned from Drakir. Drakir, one of the best players of all time. You got wave 16. What you send is Pack, Mole, and as many imps as you can. The reason you do that, right? The reason that you do that is there's so many units. Look how many units there are. Look at how many units there are. You've got 4 sets of imps, so that's 8 because the imps come out as 2. You've got 16 cardinals, now we got 24, 25, 26. You've got 26 units with a 680 cent. That is just so overwhelming. The odds that you're going to target different things goes up, right? The odds that a unit could just get fully attacked by 24 units goes up, right? You can just get absolutely overwhelmed. You can get just so overwhelmed with Pack Mole Imps. I mean, this is just, it's disgusting. So those would be probably my 2 greatest. But then again, sometimes it's better to go with the 4 eyes, right? If you have like a godly unit, a really strong sovereign, overwhelming might not be enough. Or it might not be enough to just overwhelm a unit. You might need that damage unit and like a 4 eyes, you know? But in perfect situations, you can send multiple. Wave 17, I'll be honest, I really don't have anything to give you on wave 17. I mean, like I said, once we get into these later waves, it's really hard to know what to send generically without seeing the build you're sending. You really have to ask yourself, am I sending damage or am I sending tanks? Right? And I think that is actually sort of teaching me right now the basics of Mercenaries. Am I sending tanks or am I sending DPS? Right? How strong are the units into the wave? Right? How much damage can they do on the actual wave versus how much damage does the actual wave do to them? I mean, it's really interesting, actually. This is kind of cool, right? But yeah, 17, really good wave if you save. Wave 18, I can tell you for sure that a Shaman is amazing on wave 18. There's only 6 creeps. So getting a Shaman on 18 makes one of those creeps just absolutely insanely powerful. Other than that, it's really wave dependent. Wave 19, it's another ranged wave with the toads. But a Shaman is really worth on 19. Even though it is a ranged wave where, yeah, tanks seem great, right? It's sort of like 15 again, where the units are so strong that sending a Shaman to boost one of those 19 creeps is absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And finally, wave 20. Another wave you have to have a shot. If you are sending wave 20, the Mcdooface, you have to send a shaman. You have to have a shaman. It is the difference between winning and losing so many games. I don't know how many games when I was playing a long time ago, and even recently, that I would have 400, 500 Mythium, and I'd choose to go like Seadram Pack Leader, or Needler Mole, or Kraken, right? If I just send a Shaman, because it helps the boss ramp faster, right? It would win so many games. It would win so many games. It just would. Yeah, but I think really situational sends is sort of everything. Situational sends is sort of everything here. And that's sort of what I'm learning. So, I mean, let's just go through a couple of early starts, right? That I'm going to just break down when I would want to send, and then if I would change up my sends based on what they have. So let's use right here a Trent. This guy has a Trent on wave 1. How would I send that going forward? Well, given that I've sent on 1, I would love to send a snail on 2, because most people do greed wave 2 with Trent. It is really weak to fiends, right? Because income into Swift. Once again, I didn't really get into that, right? But if I'm going to send them every wave, right? The wave that I'd really focus on is wave 4. Wave 4 is the first wave that I'd really be wanting to get a fiend. And yeah, as we go forward, he's still very weak to a fiend. He has magic damage and a possible Swift tank, but he has no damage to kill wave 4 creeps. Right? There's no damage to kill wave 4 creeps. So if I had saved here on 3 and sent big on 4, this would have been a really bad leak to a dino. Right? That would have been a really bad leak to a dino. Now, from this wave 4, if I wanted to send aggressively, he's already got multiple Swift tanks, nothing for wave 7. This would be a great Mimic on wave 7 send. Right? This would be a great Mimic wave 7 send. I decided to go early in this case scenario. But yeah, that would be a great Mimic send. From this point, has absolutely no pierce damage, so I can do either one of two things. I can resend on 7 aggressively or income, or I can save for wave 8 and send tons of tanks, specifically fiends, right? You sort of want to just spam the same thing. Once something works, you just spam it until it doesn't work. So I'm going to assume that I probably brood again here or resend. Yeah, there's the fiend, right? But yeah, brute or fiend is really strong into him. It's also weak on 8, right? Once again, sending fiend. Probably should have just full sent here too, to be totally honest, now that I'm looking at it. Really, really weak to the fiends. Has not a single unit of pierce damage for the wave. Wave 9, really strong, right? Wave 9, really strong. And then once again here on 10. On 10, I can choose two things. I can go for the DTs to stop his magic damage of the gate and the priestess, or I can go for fiends to stop the Trent damage and the impact damage from the attacking, the tanky guys. And I chose to send a DT and a Robo, right? So the DT was eat up some of the magic damage, and the Robo was trying to get through the gate and the Trent. Then from here, wave 12, he's absolutely cooked. I chose not to save and send on 12. See, this is a great learning experience, right? Watching this now, there's not a single pierce unit for wave 12. Not a single pierce unit for wave 12. But being that we sent 11, the next weak wave is going to be 14. Once again, a wave that needs piercing damage, right? So if I could save, get like 2 ogres, maybe 3 ogres. 3 ogres in a pack on wave 14 would be absolutely extinguishing. I just realized I'm not sending this guy. By the way, this is my teammate sending him. But yeah, Drake seemed to work here. Caught off guard his Azeria and could not tank half, and it worked perfect. So sometimes, like I sort of discussed earlier, you can try multiple sends and it can work. And this is because the Azeria, even with Protector, could not tank 3 creeps plus the 2 Drakes on it. Alright, and then it was still a send 4. Not so sure about the GK. I guess, once again, there's no piercing damage. There's nothing that's actually good against the GK. And just brutes for the arcane tanks. Yeah, and we won on 16 here. Once again, they're really bad on 16 because of no piercing damage. If we're looking at PZig, PZig has no pierce damage for wave 16. So you really could just send anything at this point. This player, Daddy PC, chose to go with GKs to allow the wave to cook. Right? We sort of talked about sending tanks or DPS. He chose, in this case, to send tanks, the 2 GKs, the 2 Ghost Knights, to allow the wave creeps to kill everything. So those GKs probably died relatively quickly, but the wave was going to overwhelm it fast because it was just spending so much time on those GKs. So that would just be one game. All right, let's look at another game. Gun is a good one. A lot of people like to play gun. So let's look at how you'd send gun. Let's say you sent Snail or King up wave 1. You're never leaking at wave 2. It's very difficult to leak at wave 3. Almost impossible to leak at wave 4. But in the circumstance that maybe you're trying to leak it, you have to either have 3 snails on 3 or a brute. Once again, you know me, I don't love the brute on 3, but you could leak a gun on 3 with a brute or 3 snails. Then wave 5, wave 6 are going to be your next routes. It's almost impossible to leak on wave 4. Like, look at this. I mean, it's a pro leak to a brute while being 7 workers. And you've got a couple of routes. I usually like just massing snails. The Pierce and the Fortified, with the gun usually being the best unit, I love just spamming snails. Like, I'm just always going to send like 5 snails into this. 6 snails. Yes, this robo worked. But I really just like the snails. And that's what I would just keep doing, you know? I would just keep doing snails over and over, so I'm scaling with income. Wave 6, it's once again not too good. It is great on 7 and 8. Not good on 9. And I'm sort of hyper-focusing on the gun here. So theoretically, if we just saved from wave 7 to wave 9, this guy would be cooked. Right? He has absolutely nothing for wave 9 at this point. His gun is Pierce. Zora is absolutely awful on 9. And he has 1 impact unit that is Arcane. So yeah, if you just went for a pack, 3 brutes, something like that, wave 9, this would be absolutely destroyed. So even while receiving Ascend on 8, there's just nothing to really save him. He leaks 10 over to the 2 brute robo here. Then, gonna hold wave 10. So your next send would be wave 11, right? Wave 11, the ranged wave. Or wave 13, the drill master wave. Looks like we're just gonna send normal. I think the game actually ends here. Yeah, the game actually ends here. But they could have established some pressure. They leak him on wave 9. The next play to establish pressure would be to save and then send wave 11 with tons of tanks. That could have been really nice into Noob Killer. And let's look at one more. So sort of all these are situational. You have to think, what is their best unit, right? What is the unit I'm sending, right? I'm sending a POTA. Whoever's sending a POTA, right? If I'm sending a POTA, do I want to kill the POTA? Do I want to kill the other units that are with the POTA? How do I want to leak this guy? That's what you have to ask yourself. So when you're sending a Priest of the Abyss, it's almost unleakable on wave 2. It can leak to a DT or a Lizard. If they add nothing on 2, it's not worth the risk. Same thing wave 3. You need a full 60. That is a DT and a Snail, or a Lizard and Snail, or a Brute. It's not worth the risk. Wave 4 is going to be your first really nice wave to leak it. DTs are your best friend when sending a POTA, if it's not brutes, right? But once again, I like to stay away from the power mercenary. So if you are sending a POTA, DTs almost always are going to be your best play, right? We can see a lot of snails this one, but I would like the DTs. It does become difficult when they have masks, right? Once you see the POTA mask, you're sort of in danger to never leak them. That is because they have magic and they have pierce. So you really can't leak them on 5 because POTA has the magic damage to kill the boss. She also has the magic damage to kill wave 6 while you have swift tanks. Wave 7, you probably have a lot of Hellraiser piercing damage in those, where although the Priestess is bad, wave 7 and 8, you have the piercing damage from the masks. And then wave 9, if they get an Aziria, almost impossible to leak. So wave 10 is pretty much your first wave to leak something like this. And this is one of those situations where you got to choose 2 things. Right? You got to look yourself in the eye and say, do I want to send them every wave income king? Right? Income king, like this situation. Or you can try a different strategy. Right? You can try a different strategy. And yes, you could mimic on 7. I don't recommend it. I do not recommend a mimic on 7. It doesn't work most of the time into a POTA mask build. But what you could do, right? What you could do is you send it 1 wave and then you just skip like 1 or 2 waves and then you income king. And so what this does is it at least slows down their push, right? You're never going to leak them, and it does hurt your econ a little bit, but at least it will slow down the really strong build. So when you see a really strong build and you're the one sending it, it can help you and your team if you just save 1 or 2 waves and then just income king. And then save 1 or 2 waves and then income king. Right? So you're just trying to slow them down from scaling and getting ahead of you too fast. That can be one way to deal pressure to them. But yeah, this game, it's almost impossible to leak this guy. Was able to leak him on wave 10, even with the Zerker, because of the greedy bigwig. But from here, I mean, wave 12 is probably your best bet. But there's the Hellraiser, there's Mudmans. This is going to be a really, really tough one to leak. Now it's 14 or 16, right? And sort of this is what happens when you're sending a really good build. When there's so many different units that cover that wave, right? 11 covers the Aziria, 12 is covered by the Hellraisers and Mudmans, 13 is covered by the Aziria and the Berserk, which could be a Fatalizer. 14 is probably your best bet since they sent 11. But we're just going to send every wave at this point, right? But yeah, if you were to send 14... Oh, wow, look at that massive leak. Wow, caught him sleeping there. They overpushed. Yeah, they way overpushed. But with this 14 send, there's a couple of different strategies. The strategy taken by my teammate here was the overwhelm play. All right, this was the overwhelm play. So they had Hellraisers. They had 2 of them, right? They had a Fatalizer, which is single target damage, really strong, but it takes a while to ramp. So what they did is they sent a ton of units. Instead of sending like 3 ogres, right? Just damage. They sent a ton of units so that the Hellraisers were never really single target killing anything. And the Aziria just had so many things attacking it. And they went for the overwhelm play. This would also be great to do again on wave 16. Going for that same play of just trying to overwhelm them with lots of units. Probably want some imps in this end instead of the brutes. I like the massing the imps instead of a lot of these brutes. But all good. And then you're probably looking at 19 as the next send into this. If we're only sending this, but it's also really strong into 19. 19 is going to be your next best send. Yes, there's the Hellraisers, but you have a lot of golden Aziria, Fatalizers, Canopies, Bigwigs. There's not much for 19. So this is definitely going to be a 19 send here. Going Siege Rams, allowing the wave to cook. Needlers, I guess we're going for damage. Not a huge fan of the Needlers here. I mean, 1 Needler maybe. The 4 eyes because there's big tanky units. It was also a Sui play. That did not work. But you probably do want a Mole Hermit. I know the Mole and Hermit gets shredded on 19 almost instantly, but I do think when you see the Hellraisers that a Hermit or Mole is pretty outstanding. But I think that I've rambled on this video for a bit longer than I had expected. So let's just talk about the basics one more time. I will definitely make another video. I think it is worth discussing attack effectiveness of each of the mercenaries, really breaking them down. But I do still hope that this video is helpful of sort of why we send mercenaries, whether you choose to go income mercs, power mercs, or that king up. But like I said, king up, although there is a time for king ups, you do sort of lose a little bit income if you only choose to do king ups, right? If you only choose to do king ups, you do lose a decent amount of income, which translates to gold, right? Which translates to value, and that could put you behind. It will not allow your opponent to get the gold from the mercenary send, but it is still a risky play. We talked a little bit about sort of general sends. We also talked about tanks, DPS, aura units, sort of differentiating the 3 types of mercenaries that there are. I didn't talk in depth about every single mercenary. Once again, I think that would be great for another video. I don't know if you want to watch 3 hours of mercenary discussion by Doofus Mcdooface on Legion TD2. Maybe you do. But yeah, we talked about all those. We talked about some general sends. Dinos on 4, Hermits on 5, Mimics on 7, GKs or Dinos on 8, Siege Rams on 11, Ogres on 13, Auras on 14, right? We talked about a lot of those. Hopefully some of those can be helpful to you. And I just looked at a couple of builds, sort of walking you through when I would aim to send if I was going to send aggressively, and sort of what the best sends probably were, or what were some good sends. And so I hope this has been helpful to you. And yeah, more to come. What didn't make sense to you? Thank you for any positive comments. I hope this was helpful. But what did you not understand? I definitely would think about talking about attack effectiveness, like what exactly is correct into swift tanks, what exactly is correct into arcane tanks, things like that. Definitely think should have a revisit. Do you want me to talk through every single mercenary there is? I could do that also. What would be useful to you in the next future learning mercenary video? But without further ado, thank you for watching. I'm Doofus Mcdooface, and I'll see you in the next one.